If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, John Wheaton of the Righteous Savages, and I'm back. I wasn't able to do the show on Sunday because I was actually out at a long range class and did not have any internet because the Starlink went down and had no way of actually broadcasting. So Chris stepped in and handled it like a champ, but we're back. And we have a very important topic to talk about tonight, and that is the 5 things that you guys need to know to prepare for potential terrorist attacks. And this is a big one. And I apologize. S2 is dropping out and end. So let me bring him back in. Hello, my brother. How are you? It's been a long time, it seems like.
It's been a busy last couple of weeks, man. We finally completed the move.
That's awesome. That's always a big sigh of relief when you get that done. So welcome back. And I know that this episode is going to be right in your wheelhouse because we're talking about 5 things that you need to prepare for before an attack comes. And unfortunately, that could happen any day, but these are always principles that you can apply to prepare for that unfortunate possibility. So let me get this up real quick, and we will go. Okay, but before we get started, I'm going to go back to this. Before we get started, we're going to start off with the conflicted question, and then we are going to get into the new segment, which is fake news. We're going to report on what the media wants you to focus on, or some of the tactics that they're using to bring you fake news. But the conflicted question is coming your way. Just give me a second. I'm getting things all situated. I literally got into the studio like 2 minutes. I was mad dashing it. So before we went live. So I apologize for that. Anyways, so here's a conflicted question. You guys can think about this, and then we'll get your answers at the end of the show. Martial law has been declared, and the police and military are going house to house looking for food, water, and other supplies to confiscate. Your supplies are well hidden and would not be found through normal questioning and searching procedures. However, the official comes to your house. The official that comes to your house is a relative and knows what you have. He informs you that it is his duty to take your supplies and arrest you and your family. What would you do to address, or how would you address this situation? That's a difficult one.
Sounds something like right out of the movie Homestead.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. But hold your answers, and we'll get them in the comments at the end. We also have an announcement tomorrow night. Mike Glover is joining the panel to talk about irregular warfare. Quick note on Mike. He has actually been cleared of all charges and is eager to get back into the mix. So we're excited to have him back on the show with Chris tomorrow night. And I believe Jeff MD is going to be with them as well. Guys, if you want to join the community for a free Substack account, just go over to Substack and sign up for a free account. You'll get our Saturday watch guide, which is a little list of everything that we publish throughout the week. And it gives you guys a quick review guide to find out the stuff that you're interested in. Absolutely free. So go over and don't miss out on that extra content. It's a big deal. All right. We're going to start off fake news here. We have some good ones here. Get this formatted right. And first and foremost is that CNN is up to its old tactics. Let me share this one. Kristi Noem said she is working on charges against CNN for sharing ICE tracking data. Let's watch this. 59 seconds. Apparently, CNN has been sharing this data to help illegal immigrants or illegal aliens from getting out or getting caught by ICE. Let's watch it.
CNN yesterday pushed an app that lets you track where ICE agents are. Tom Homan was saying that perhaps CNN should be prosecuted for that. That's obstruction of law enforcement. Your response?
Yeah, we're working with the Department of Justice to see if we can prosecute them for that, because what they're doing is actively encouraging people to avoid law enforcement activities, operations, and we're going to actually go after them and prosecute them with the partnership of PAM if we can, because what they're doing we believe is illegal.
And they may be prosecuted also for having given false reports on the attack in Iran.
Yes.
They were given totally false reports. It was totally obliterated, and our people have to be celebrated, not come home and say, what do you mean we didn't hit the target? We hit the target. You know, the pilots came home and they said we hit the target. So they may be very well prosecuted for that. What they did there we think is totally illegal. Okay, let's go. Follow us.
S2, snap reaction to that. CNN sharing data on ICE agents to illegals to avoid prosecution.
Well, that is conspiracy as well as obstruction.
Mm-hmm.
And the executives of CNN, as well as the people, the broadcast anchors, should be prosecuted to the fullest extent that those charges will allow. And on top of that, the FCC should also pull their broadcast license.
Agreed. There's a lot of tools in the tool bag. You know, of course, the left's going to scream to high heavens, but I completely agree with you. The gloves have to come off at some point with these absolutely obstructive and like borderline evil news organizations that are just doing the work of communism in this country. It's gross. You know, the more and more that I see this stuff run around and rear its ugly head, the more and more I think McCarthy was right. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So next fake news. This one it's kind of a shot at Elon. Elon and Trump have apparently re-engaged in their arguments over the big, beautiful bill. Full disclosure, I'm not a big fan of insane bills that spend a lot of money myself, and with the bull crap that the parliamentarian in the Senate pulled over the last couple of days, stripping out almost everything that was meaningful to us in our everyday lives, I'm about done with it. But this is really interesting because remember, so this says, remember when Elon said that tariffs would tank the economy? He also claimed that the attacks on Ron DeSantis wouldn't land, leave building awesome rockets, batteries, and EVs to Elon. He kind of sucks at politics. Here we go. 37 seconds.
How much we've been collecting in revenues. And I did this in part because Wilfred's here and he can talk about the UK trade deal, but just this is the monthly numbers. And they have gone up a lot. June is actually set for another big increase of $27 billion. That is money coming into U.S. coffers from tariffs. We are collecting a lot of revenue. So far, guys, $121 billion has flowed into the U.S. government since the start of the fiscal year. It's still a tiny portion of the overall revenues that the U.S. government gets, but it's increasingly a lot, especially we haven't seen it in terms of the consumer paying off higher inflation.
Isn't that interesting? All of a sudden, we've got money coming in.
Well, the last number I heard was 88 billion. So that leaves, let's see here.
Well, June would have just closed, and that's what she was talking about there. I think 22, and she said 27 billion on with June. So
Yeah, that only leaves 31,912,000,000,000 to get to
Yeah.
a balanced budget. So
right, and I get that. I totally get that. But it is funny that all of these economic and honestly, the economic numbers, the wage increases are all going up right now. It's kind of crazy that all of these naysayers said that this wouldn't work. And so far, it seems to work, and we'll see how it plays out.
history proves that it does work.
Yep, exactly. And you have to understand, real quick tangent here, a lot of these modern day economists, they operate off of something that is called modern monetary theory. It is basically the idea that money is fake, and that you can, and no one's going to tank an economy. You can just spend and spend and spend. If you're the first world, it's essentially what we see Congress doing and all these other people. But it doesn't take into account things that have historically worked, like being on a gold standard where you actually have real valuables backing up your money. Tariffs being a way to fund the government and to be able to enrich your economy against the world. So this is all, you have to keep in mind that most of the people that are talking about the economy have been trained in these ideologies, and they're essentially kind of made up stuff in a lot of ways. So
Socialism.
Yeah, exactly. And in the words of Lenin, the end goal of socialism is communism. So anybody that tells you that socialism and communism are not the same, Lenin, the father of communism, of actually implementing communism, actually said that they were. It was the goal.
And in the words of the Queen of England, communism is fun until you run out of other people's money.
Yes. Okay, now, so that's the news, the fake news that we're going to report on tonight that the media is trying to feed you. But we're going to go ahead and transition to our main topic, and this is an important one, and it is something that everybody, you guys need to get pens and papers out or type some of these down in your notes. If you're watching on your computer, get your iPad out. There's a lot of really good information here, and you guys need to keep in mind that this is really evergreen stuff. And what I mean by evergreen, it's an old radio term of a subject that is always important and always needed. So we're talking about the 5 important preps that everybody needs to do before the next terrorist attack on America. And this is imminent. Like we know this, and I'm going to start off with this little nugget from Dave Boone Benton and Sarah Adams recently on the Dangerous Skills podcast, and he's explaining this first thing that we're going to talk about, which is tiered attacks or multi-stage operations by terrorist organizations.
But when we say multiple attacks at multiple locations, we're talking not only multiple locations in a city, but multiple cities. So there might be an attack in Houston. Simultaneously, there's attack somewhere in Virginia. There's another attack, in another city. So this is nationwide, which will create panic, chaos, fear, and a paralysis that will overwhelm the American response system and the American psyche and basically shut the country down.
Yeah, and I think one thing that makes it more understandable, because we lots of times think the ground attacks in a city because we got used to October 7th, but there's still an aviation piece of the plot. And I think at least those of us who are older understood what they did with 4 airplanes. But remember, even in real time, we didn't know if it was 4 airplanes. We didn't know if it was 10 airplanes. We didn't know if it was 20 airplanes. We didn't even know what was going on, right? And so they're going to have the same type of airline plot, but it's going to be 3 times larger. So just think the chaos of is this real? What's going on? What happened to that plane? Why did that plane come down? How quickly do you ground stop all the planes before something else happens, right? And now that is over the whole United States, right? Because these planes are above us. And so that's something we need to keep in mind too. There's that piece of the plot, which again will cripple responses and just cause chaos, right? Americans aren't going to know what's going on. Even on 9/11, it was so confusing. And remember, we didn't even know who bin Laden was when people started saying bin Laden, right? I'm a college student. Who's this guy that did this big attack on America? And we have a lot of Americans, even today, don't even hear the name Al Qaeda, right? They don't know there's any sort of threat. So it's very concerning. We are going to be caught off guard in some ways, and the terrorists are finding ways to catch us off guard, and they're being creative. I mean, we saw in Israel, they came in the paragliders, creative. Mumbai, they came on boats into that a city that large, creative, right? So how are they going to do that here with us?
Okay, S2. We're going to go through a couple of different. We have really 3 different examples of this that I pulled out, and she mentioned one of them just now. But we're going to talk about this. But real quick, I want to get your rundown on tiered attacks. Commonly, the tactics are that there is initial soft attack to strike panic and cause panic. And then a secondary attack targeting first responders or fleeing crowds, and then possibly tertiary attacks, hospitals, law enforcement staging areas, or transport hubs. And I'll point this out before I give you the floor, sir. We just saw a kind of a mini version of this with this shooter out in Idaho. And so I'll give you the floor to talk about kind of what this would look like, and then we're gonna actually look at 3 historical events in the last 20 years that really show what these things look like.
So I wrote a paper last year on this, and what I assessed the initial phase of attacks would look like would involve a series of coordinated attacks on high-profile venues, such as hotels, train stations, shopping malls, schools, religious centers, and or popular restaurants. And the simultaneous nature of the attack's purpose would be to overwhelm law enforcement, first responders, and critical services, i.e. hospitals, urgent cares, and things of that nature. The initial phase would lay the groundwork to instill fear and capitalize on mass casualties on the public. The second phase would be critical infrastructure attacks, such as transportation, security forces, law enforcement facilities, armories, military facilities. And that purpose would be to create confusion and divert resources away from primary targets and to gather weapons for sustainment operations. And the attacks that I think would be expected would be some of the ones that they've talked about there. Expect the Mumbai style attacks, i.e. Hotel Mumbai, the Moscow type attacks, that would be the Russian theater, the Beslan Russian school style attacks.
Mm-hmm. There's so many.
Yeah.
Here's one that you could talk about real quick as you're talking. The London bombing is one of the attacks where this was in 2005. It was there were 3 suicide bombers that detonated their explosives in 3 separate London underground trains, followed by a 4th that detonated on a double-decker bus. I had almost completely forgotten about this attack until I started researching for tonight's show, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that was maybe one of the early, because that was 20 years ago, one of the early examples of what these would look like." But I'll give it back to you, sir.
I tend to correlate a lot of these reports on the supposed things and the things that have happened in the past. I look at movies. And when I look at the London bombing, I correlate this one to the movie The Siege with Denzel Washington and whatever her name is. It was kind of the same thing, actually. And, this particular thing, this happened so long ago, this basically gives you their MO of how they operate in using coordinated attacks. In this case, what Sarah's saying, they're getting creative about the entry into the areas, and one of the things that I see is that they don't have to be creative. They're already here.
Mm-hmm.
So they're walking around amongst us, and anything could happen at any moment. So
Absolutely. It's a big deal. And so next is the one that we've talked about twice, is the Mumbai terrorist attacks in 2008. And that was 3 locations where hostages were taken by the terrorists. And it was carried out in Mumbai by a Pakistani-based organization. So this was, well, you know what? I'm going to turn the you have a lot of decades of experience about this, so I'm going to let you talk through this. And when we get to the later stuff, I'm going to let you talk through this terrorist stuff, so that we can, and then we'll move on to some of the other stuff, the other key points for tonight's episode.
well, it was the Mumbai bombings. Their end game was to take the hotel, is what that amounted to.
Mm-hmm.
They needed that because that was where they had the most bang for their buck as far as hostages go. Yeah, being kind of caught off guard tonight because I didn't see the brief for this.
Yeah, and I apologize for that. I literally put it together right before I got on. But
the fact remains is they were very effective at using small arms to carry this out. They didn't have to have explosives. They had grenades. They had, if you want to call them this, they had assault weapons, machine guns, basically. And some of that stuff was pre-staged, and it was pre-staged months ahead of time.
Yes.
Which is kind of the situation that we look at right now. Is we have shipping containers that have entered the country. We heard about the missiles that were possibly smuggled across the border, the southern border, that were going to be used to take out Trump. And now we're hearing other things because of July 4th coming up. And this is a very pivotal point in our history for us. Yep,
exactly. And that is really, really important for us to know. So Mumbai, and then we're going to move to the 2015 Paris attacks, because this is another one, multiple places, and across an entire city with Islamic militants doing things like drive-by shootings. They took control of a concert hall where the Eagles of death metal were playing, and in total, it was over a 48-hour period. 130 people were killed and 350 were injured. These are massive attacks in a very congested area. If you've ever been to Paris, it's buildings are right on top of each other. It's like a major city of the world, and you have to. You have to understand that this is what these kind of things will look like. So, any thoughts on the Paris attack of 2015? I'm just giving examples of things that have happened, or any other attacks that you can think of that would be good.
Well, once again, this was coordinated attacks in 6 different locations. And you had 130 people that were killed, plus the 7 attackers using suicide bomb vests or whatever. You had 416 injured and nearly 100 critically injured. And this was carried out by 9 people. 9 people. And I believe Sarah Adams has also said that this is kind of what the cell structure would be like of what they're trying to put together here in the West, is that they've already sent their forward commanders over here to basically map out everything that they're looking at here, and that they were training teams over in the training camps in various locations around the world, and then they would be sent here across the southern border. However, I think most of them came across the northern border. Because we didn't see a lot of the Middle Eastern folks coming through the southern border. They have a very high population of Middle Eastern folks in Canada, which would be prime territory for them to come across to. But as she said, they would be small teams, probably teams of 3 to 5 people, and they would carry out these coordinated attacks, and none of the people on the teams would know what their targets are until the day of. So the only person that would know would be the commanders of those cells.
What is okay, Pete? I'm not 100% sure what you're talking about here, but I will look this up. The prick attack in Europe.
We're pricked.
I'm not sure what you're speaking of here, but we're going to look it up here. Thank you for the tip, but I'm not 100% sure. Oh, okay. So this was needle spike attacks surging in festivals in Europe. This is actually USA Today.
I remember that. I remember that.
This is literally this article's June 26th. I'm going to pull this up. Thank you for the information here. So this is something where people are. Let me read this real quick. I honestly did not know about this, but this is a very big deal, because like a pinprick is all you need to get AIDS or multiple other types of viruses that are very, very dangerous. So drugging people, fentanyl is another thing. That's the biological side of things. So it looks like 150 people were reported to have been hit with needle spiking. So yeah, that's interesting, and that is something that I'm going to follow up on and give you guys a little bit more information on that in some upcoming episodes, because that's
I seem to recall that there was something. So this was updated June 26th. When was the actual event? Because I seem to recall this happening a couple of years ago.
I don't see it on this article.
Yeah, you'd have to go to the Wayback Engine to find it.
2023 data UK.
It is 2022. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, this is pretty crazy. So, yeah, this is something we'll follow up on for sure. I wasn't 100% sure what you were speaking of, but yeah, that's very good. So. Yeah, we do read the chat when we can, and when I'm not solo, I get a much more opportunity to read the chat. So, S2, I did send you the brief, so you can kind of catch up. Anyways, moving on. So that's our first big bucket here is understanding the patterns of attacks. What the pattern of attack is going to look like. So the MO in recent years and the way that they've been developing, October 7th in Israel was an example of tiered attacks and swarm attacks. So that's really all of the intel is pointing towards that stuff. It doesn't mean that we can rule out lone wolves, but it does also, this is probably what we need to be looking for, which brings us to our second of the 5 things that we need to be preparing. And that is situational awareness. And this is something we could spend hours on. We're going to go over the high points, and we're going to talk about the ways that we use situational awareness to be able to see what an attack developing or warning signs, and recognizing them will buy you precious moments. If you're out with your children and you see something developing, you see somebody weirdly walking up with a big bag of something, and they're unzipping it, and and you see somebody pulling weapons or gear out of their bags, get your family out and then call the authorities. Don't ever try and be a hero, especially if you have your kids with you. If you're alone and you're a trained person, that's a different story, and we'll get to that later. But essentially, like, these observable warning signs and being able to recognize them is going to buy you the time that it may actually save you and your family's lives. So first of all, what to watch for: surveillance of people. We want to watch people to see if they're recording, watching security. One of the things that has been popping up over recent years is these 2 or 3 people will go into a church, and one of the questions that they can continually ask is, do you live stream your service? This is a big key because one of the things that terrorists love is to be able to broadcast this stuff. Remember the killings of the burning that ISIS did of chopping the guy's head off with a chainsaw and burning the one guy alive in a cage and videoing it and putting it out on the internet. They love this kind of stuff because it instills more terror in people. So surveillance of your surroundings is very, 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 very important. And also trusting your gut. If you ask, and Tony Blauer talks about this all the time, if you ask somebody right before an attack happens, right before they're assaulted, or right before, almost to a person, they will say, I had a really bad feeling about something. Something didn't feel right. And so don't ignore that, because it could save your life. And that's important for you to understand. Key places to be observant and not be on your phones. If you have to stop for gas, especially at nighttime, don't stop someplace that's not well lit. And don't stop at places where the area looks shady. It's important that we understand those things and we take those steps, and always make sure that when you have to do that stuff that you are armed. And I would generally say that whether or not you have a concealed carry permit, it's not going to matter if your life's in the balance. So arm yourself. I'm not saying break the law, but you have to weigh all of that stuff on your own. So anything to add to that first point?
Yeah. So looking at people is, growing up as an antisocial kid, I spent a lot of time watching people and looking at things in the environment around me. You can spot things about people. For instance, is somebody really fidgety? Are they constantly touching their face? What kind of clothes are they wearing? I mean, a big heavy leather coat in the middle of summer doesn't really kind of fit. So
Right.
Watch people and watch what they do. Look at their waistlines. Most of the time when people are carrying a weapon on them, it's going to be at their waistline. Look at their waistlines and see if there's any kind of abnormal bulge there where they can't conceal their weapon very well. So again, look at people, look at their statures, look at what they're doing. If they're fidgeting, if they're constantly touching their face, that's a tell. So
Yep, absolutely. Next point would be testing of a response. If you see people testing response times, or you see, fire alarms being pulled, or people leaving bags out to see what's going on, that is a key point to look at. So that's important for us to understand that terrorists are going to test, they're going to do dry runs, they're going to do rehearsals, watching for those behavioral cues of people coordinating and moving together and those sorts of things. Very, very important. Behavioral red flags is another one. S2 just said this: nervousness, or they're fidgety, inappropriate clothing, stuff that doesn't go, and some sort of like rigid or robotic demeanor. Also, one thing I will say about somebody who is an experienced at carrying weapons on them, like I carry a gun on me all the time, they won't act that specific way. Most of the time when these terrorists go to do their attacks, they're not used to carrying the weapons that they're carrying. And so that's why they will act a little bit weird. And they're very on alert because they're going to do an attack.
They'll constantly readjust their weapon and those type of things.
Yep.
That's why I said watch the waistlines, because the waistline is key to that. And one other thing that I would add to this too is if you're in an impermissive environment, i.e. you can't carry a firearm, you can't carry an obvious weapon, there are things that you can carry that are improvised that you can carry. One of the things that I used to give to all of my students was a tactical pen. And it's just a regular pen, but on one end it has a tungsten spike on it used for a glass breaker, and then on the other end it's a regular ballpoint pen. But those things can inflict a lot of damage, but you've got to have training on how to use them effectively.
Yep.
Another thing you can carry with you too is a piece of Kevlar cordage with a big nut on it, a big bolt. And
Yep.
you can wear that around your neck. I've walked into state capitals wearing that. Nobody bats an eye. I've gotten on airplanes with that. And nobody bats an eye.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and this is all good information to have. What we have to consider, and there is good information and good definitions on these government websites. So this is FBI.gov's investigating terrorism, and some very important things, some current threats, lone offenders. And we talked about that just a minute ago, that we could still have lone wolves doing some attacks that may look similar to this shooter in Idaho. And I don't know what the ideology was. It looks like he was a young man of 20 years old, but you don't know what the ideology is. And trust me, if there's something bad, you won't find out about it, or at least it'll try to be buried. And then internet and social media, there's a lot of things there, but you have to dig through some of these government websites. There's good information on them, especially when it comes to formulating a plan. And this is DHS here. So this is, see if you see something, say something to let the authorities know. Now, we also know that the authorities don't always act on this information. In fact, a lot of active shooters, they say, "Oh, we knew about that guy, and we investigated him multiple times." Okay, well, yeah, you did really, really good job there, but this stuff does need to be reported, because it needs to be, and local law enforcement would be the best place to start, in my opinion. And because they're going to be the ones that are going to react first to it. So, so this is DHS website. Each one of these is an interactive website. You can go to it, recognizing suspicious activity. So if you go there, it gives you some pointers on signs of activity. So expressed in a implied threat, observed surveillance, prolonged and unusual. And we've talked about this stuff. This is the stuff that we were talking about. Photography. If you see somebody taking photography of things you wouldn't normally photograph, like security cameras, that's a good indication. Diversions, like a thief running out to set the stage for an attack, aviation activity, testing and probing of security, all big things to look out for. And then there is also, this is actually a really, really good, so there's a advanced law enforcement rapid response training. This is alert training. I have actually seen some of this stuff in practice, but this website is avoiddeniedefend.org. And they have a lot of resources on there. And the reason I told you guys to get pens and paper is so you guys can write this stuff down. We're trying to give you guys information so you can build your own plan. We can give you all the information in the world. If you guys don't act on it and take action, it's just that. It's just information. You need to, and we'll get to formulating a plan and doing all that stuff soon. But of those three things, I'm going to let you add to whatever you want to their S2.
I don't really have anything to add to that. I haven't heard of this University of Texas Alert Center thing. I haven't heard of that before, but
it's a training system. So yeah, and it came about in like 2002. It's very it's used very extensively in law enforcement for sure.
Yeah, so the one thing that I would say with the FBI is they really have been somewhat, I want to say, reactive to everything. Yeah. And as you said, we knew about that guy. I was waiting for them to talk about this guy in Idaho and say that, we had him on our radar for about a year. He was acting a little weird online. And, because let's put it this way, I don't really place a lot of faith and trust in the FBI at this point because they seem to be managing the crime versus solving it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I completely agree with you. It doesn't mean that we don't give the information, but because information is key here. And, there's a lot of things changing within the government right now, so we don't know what 2 more years of this is going to look like. But I completely agree with you. I think that the FBI historically, especially in the last decade, has been awful. If I was to give them a grade, if I could give them a grade below F, I would, because it seems like every single active shooter that's out there was on the FBI's watch list. But what are you guys doing? Oh, I forgot. You're going after law-abiding citizens.
Grandmothers at school board meetings and
right. Yep. So the next thing. So that's just a brief overview. Like I said, we could do 5 hours on situational awareness. It's that big of a topic. But just walking out on situational awareness is. I'm going to give you guys these 3 action steps. Is know the baseline of your environment. Know your environment. Know what's going on. And if you know that, then you can identify anomalies. That's the next one. If you know the environment, you can identify anomalies. And then always, when you're in a place, in a location, even if you're in your car and you're driving, understand where your exits and your rally points are, and talk about this. If you're in a Walmart, know where the back exits are. It's typically through the loading docks in the back in that area. But if you're at a restaurant, look around for multiple exits and place yourself at a point where you can see them. I talk about this with my 12-year-old all the time, and he's really starting to become a young man. I've got something really cool to show you guys later, but he is I talked to him about this. He's old enough now that he can understand, and he knows if he sees something weird, to tell me. And he also knows what to do if somebody comes in with a gun shooting people or threatening people. He knows what his priorities are.
Get the hell out.
Yep. Exactly. His priority is get out. If we're with the family, it's you get out, get your brother and sister out, the younger kids, and don't worry about me. But we're gonna rally out here, and we talk about that stuff. And you have to talk about that stuff. It's important. But those are the three tips I would say is know your baseline, identify anomalies, and always have 2 exits and a rally point when you're entering a space. And that sounds paranoid and it sounds crazy, but it could save your life. Moving to the next topic, and this one is communication and contingency planning. So this is the third one. Comms and contingency planning are 2 of the biggest things you can do. And so this is ready.gov. Simple, generic way to plan for your household and your family members. And this is just a good, if you don't have something or you don't know where to start, this is a good starting point. That's the only reason I pulled this up, was so that you guys can say, oh, okay, this is kind of what it looks like. Then you understand that you can put all this stuff down and you can make a plan with your family, whether it be preparing for a fire or surviving a mass shooting. Those things are both important. So your key components of this let's start with why this matters. Cell networks. We know how cell networks act when an emergency happens. They get overloaded or they completely fail. And you cannot get communications out to key people, your family, or people in your community that you need to be in contact with. So the key components of this, and we'll start here before we go to plan making and all this other stuff, is you need 2 rally points, a primary and a secondary, easy to access that everybody can remember in your family or your group. Backup communications, radios, satellite messengers, text-based apps. Those are all big key components. Check-in protocols every 15 to 30 minutes. This is straight out of the military. There's always a comms window. A good example of this would be the movie Lone Survivor, when the SEAL team's going over the mountain and they missed 2 comms windows. That was a fatal failure in that mission, by the way, because if you miss 2 comms windows, you stop. because you don't know what's changed. And they decided to keep going. And there's a lot of other things in that mission that are either false or complete failures, but it's a good example for you guys. And then simple code words. Chris has talked about this on here as well. Having a code word that if you say that code word, everybody gets up and leaves.
I'm thinking pork and beans.
Yeah. Yeah, something generic that you could weave into a conversation. If you're at a restaurant, like green beans or something like that, you know. And then drilling this, because if you're like me, you have I have small kids. I have a 4-year-old, I have a 9-year-old who has autism, and then I have my 12-year-old who's like an awesome kid and really smart, and he really can take responsibility. Knowing the different children and where they are, I could tell my son to do something and he would understand it. My middle son, he would always want to know why or how to do it. So the reason that we say, like, practice these things, practice quarterly drills, maybe on a Friday night, you're out for dinner and maybe you tell your wife, hey, we're going to drive separate vehicles and then we're going to practice getting out when we're done with our meal, we're going to practice getting out real quick and going and meeting at our rally point. Or you're there with your family in the house and you say, okay, the house is on fire, where do we go? And you drill that stuff quarterly until everybody understands it. It's important. It's really important, and have these plans. Some other good things. This is radios. Radios are a big thing to get into. Now, comms is a monster to swallow, I will tell you that. But there are some simpler off-grid communications that you can do. So General Mobile Radio Service, GMRS, these are like the little radios you can get on Amazon, and you can program them for bands. I think and you know a lot more about comms than I do, S2. I think you can listen for free on shortwave, but you have to have a license to broadcast. But in an emergency situation, it really doesn't matter. But you can correct me if I'm wrong there. But
yeah, and the general mobile rate and the GMRS system also, you're supposed to have a license. However, that license costs $30 and it covers your entire family. So if you have 10 members of your family, they all have GMRS radios, and you're not required to put out your call sign over GMRS either. That's not a part of the protocol, but it covers your entire family. You got 10 family members, give them a radio, good to go. The problem with any radio service is line of sight.
Yep.
And if you don't have line of sight or you don't have height, your signal's not going to go anywhere unless you have repeaters already configured into your radios. But therein lies another problem is that you may have repeaters for your immediate area where you live, but let's say you're not somewhere where you live and you don't know what those repeaters are.
Absolutely. Yep.
And programming those into your radio, you have to have some very specialized information about the GMRS repeaters. And in some cases, you have to have permission from the GMRS repeater operator to use that repeater. Right.
Exactly. One other option I wanted to throw up here, and this is a satellite communicator, Garmin InReach SE. You can actually text, if you know the numbers, you can actually text through satcoms on this thing. I'm probably going to buy like 4 of these over the next.
I've got one sitting right in front of me.
And you can program it with specific cell numbers, or you can text back and forth two things. If you
can send an emergency messages with those things that you pre-configured in them. However, one thing that's important to understand about the InReach system, you have to have a cell phone that works with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's important to understand this, but it's also great for mapping if you do a lot of off-roading or biking or anything like this. This is a great little thing, and $350. It's not really, in the grand scheme of things, being able to have some sort of critical communication at a specific time. That's a pretty big deal. But this is a great little thing to think about and look at. So
So we've got a guy in the chat here. His name's Bruno. Bruno is a truck driver, and I have a question. For Bruno. Hey, Bruno, do truckers even use citizen band radios anymore? You can answer that at your leisure.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good question.
Anyway, moving on.
Anyway, so quick tips here for this specific. So comms is our third thing that we need to be understand, because in warfare, and make no mistake, this terrorism stuff is warfare. In warfare, disrupting enemy communications is one of the biggest ways that you win wars. So if they disrupt our communications, we are caught blind. We are lost, and that's how people die. So it's important to understand that. So there's three quick tips that I'll give you guys on this, and that is write key phone numbers down on a laminated card and put it someplace. Have it in your wallet. It can be small. They don't, if you can read, you can put it in. Even if you have like a Ridge wallet, you could make a card-sized laminated, put it in there, so you always have your key phone numbers. Put one in your car, so that you always have them around. Because, in all honesty, I still remember all of the phone numbers that I had growing up. My aunts, my grandma, all of them. I remember them because I had to dial them. I had to remember them to dial them on the old rotary phone or the touchtone phone, because we didn't have saved contacts on our phones back then. Now, when I meet somebody new, I couldn't tell you Chris Heaven's number right off the top of my head because I saved his contact and I just go to his contact. But that's something that we need to keep in mind. Who are the key 20 people that we need to have their phone numbers, and get that on a card and laminate it. It's super simple. And then another thing is backup power. I have these little battery banks that can charge my phone like 6 times. They're super powerful, and they're about the size of my phone. They're about this size. And I can charge those, and I can charge a lot of other things too. So if you add an inReach or something else, you take that with you, and you can charge and keep things going. They also make them that have the solar panels on them, so they'll trickle charge in the sunlight. And then have radios tested and ready. Don't just get your radios and set them on the shelf and never test them. This is just like what we talked about with action plans. Test them on a regular basis, whether it be monthly. It's like your smoke detectors. We change the batteries every time that the clocks change. Make that a practice. I actually change out the batteries on all my red dots. Any of my LPDOs that have power or illumination in them, I change them once every year. Most of the ones I have will last well over a year, but just as a point of making sure that they don't fail me in a critical moment. In the winter time, around Christmas time, is when I change those every year.
I carry spares in the pistol grip of my rifles,
and I do that as well. So I do have a contingency there, but I do just make sure that I change them. And then the used batteries may go into one that's not my personal defense weapon. And then if it dies while I'm training on the range, it's no big deal. But whatever my primary weapons are, that I know I'm going to use, is going to be the first thing I grab. That's what I'm going to put fresh batteries in every time. So, anything else to add to those quick tips?
Yeah, DJ on AB he's saying here, those battery banks I tested many, some are huge capacity, but they charge very slowly. DJ on AB, you might want to try out the Anchor ones. Those charge really fast.
Yep.
And
yep.
As far as sometimes I carry a small Opus generator with me too that will do a lot of stuff. So
here's Cowboy Roy Rogers. I still use my CB radio. I've got them in my personal vehicles, also a testament throughout the quarter of Texas that I drive. I hear more Spanish than English.
Yeah, he's right. Because I was running around with my CB a couple of years ago, and I heard more Spanish than anything.
Yep. So, and that's it for that's what we're going to give you for comms. And like I said, we have an hour, a little over, and we're probably going to go a little over an hour tonight. But it's an important topic. because like we could spend multiple episodes on each one of these 5, but I want to give you guys quick information so you can start really just thinking and start moving in the right direction. So next we're going to talk about is trauma response, medical preparedness. Say you do get caught in one of these attacks and you're all of a sudden your child's arm is gushing blood. You need to know what to do. And so there's a bunch of essential skills that actually aren't hard to learn. You just have to take the time to learn them. Stopping massive bleeding with tourniquets and wound packing, understanding the stuff. Managing airways and chest injuries, dealing with sucking chest wounds or obstructions, understanding how to lift and move the chin, lift and pull the chin down so that airways can be opened up. Preventing shock. That's a big one that it's a standard for anybody that's ever had a simple self-aid buddy care class in the military. But it's something that not every one of our of everyday people in the United States know. And so the next thing, the first thing I'll talk about is an IFAC. What is an IFAC? It's an individual first aid kit. If you ever heard that term, that's what that means. It's a military term. But there are some minimum contents that you should look into getting. There's some companies that put these together for you. I'm just going to say this. Amazon's hit or miss. But there are some companies that do really good at building these kits. I'm trying to think.
Army Navy Outdoor out of Jacksonville, Florida, actually sells the military issue ones.
Yep. And so My Medic is another company. You guys can go and you can get anything from a small belt line one all the way up to like a massive trauma kit. Now they're not cheap, but it will have everything in there. The individual ones I think are like $80, and you could get one for each vehicle and just have it there. And typically they'll have like a rat's tourniquet on them, or a soft T, or a cat, just depending on they're like a cat tourniquet has been a standard for a long time. Soft T was used by the Navy SEALs.
Just make sure that when the tourniquet that you get does not have a plastic bayonet on it.
Yep. So I'm going to give you guys one key thing here. I'm going to show you this website. There's only one place where you can be sure that you're getting a real cat tourniquet, and that is North American Rescue. They're $34. And you can get them in different colors. Typically, the orange ones are the ones that I use for training. It's an identification that I use to know that that's one of my training cats. And then the black ones are typically what I have in my first aid kit. But you can color code them. There are some newer ones, and I forget the name of the company, but there's a company that makes one that's really good. That's actually smaller, and it's ideal for little kids. And I'll see if I can find it, but and put it in our Signal chat. But this is a great thing. It's $34. You can order them from their website and go to North American Rescue. Write that down. Don't go to Amazon to buy a tourniquet, because you'll invariably get something with a plastic windlass here, and that will break. This is aluminum, so it's not going to break. It may bend a little bit, but and then guys get into a stop the bleed class. They have these all over the country. Look for a local range. We do them at our range sometimes. We're planning on doing more of them, but get in a stop the bleed class. It's typically like a 4-hour class. And they'll have dummies there that you can mess around with. You can see here, like they're putting a tourniquet on a fake leg. The other thing is like understand what it feels like to have a tourniquet put on you, so you'll put a tourniquet on yourself. It's painful, but it will save your life. So
one of the things that we did rather than going through one of the mainstream classes, is we had some people that we knew that were actually ER surgeons, and we approached them to hold a class for a group of us. So if you have people in your area that you know that are in the medical profession, they know how to do this stuff, and particularly if they work in the ER, ask them if they'll hold a class for you at your church or something like that.
Yep. So here's another thing, like Red Cross has a take a class, a first aid class here. And you can choose the class: first aid, CPR, AED. So AED are like the heart way to start somebody's heart if they're having a heart attack or their heart stops. CPR, that's another big one for airways. So they have online classes and training. So there's resources out there. And if you're close to somebody that's a reputable trainer, that's great. And you guys should understand and get into these training classes. The other one that I'll throw up here is the Committee for Tactical Emergency Casualty Care, and this is CTEC. A lot of military and police are being trained with CTEC now. There's a lot of resources on this website. There's guidelines. All of this stuff is good stuff to understand what it means to actually be useful when a critical moment arises that you need to save somebody's life. S2, I'll turn it over to you for a second.
You pretty much covered it. I put my little tidbits in here. We're good.
All right, cool. The last one, but not least one, is understanding self-defense and readiness. All of these things, and there's tons of resources. The firearms community is a massive community that has a lot of resources. But what I will tell you is find a reputable trainer. But that's not even the first part of it. I literally last night was training a couple of ladies, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, on concealed carry. So a good friend of mine who's a pastor and his son's a police officer, they asked me to train their wives on concealed carry. And so we were out at the range last night and doing some drills. And the mindset when we first started out, when I say, okay, we're going to fire 2 shots after I'd gone through all of the fundamentals with them, we're getting to live fire. And one of them would say, oh no. And it's like that's the wrong mindset. And so we talked through that a lot of getting the right mindset and understanding that, hey, you're probably going to be under stress. When you're training on the range, you're in ideal conditions because that does not simulate any kind of stress, but you have to start somewhere. So if you guys have never shot a gun, or you went and got a concealed carry permit, or you went and bought a gun because you wanted to protect yourself and you haven't touched it, or you shot it at your concealed carry, your 30 rounds at your concealed carry class, and then you said, okay, I'm good. That's good enough. It's not. It's absolutely not. And I hate to break it to you, but I'm going to be real about this. I have seen police officers that train all the time crumble under stress. And I'm not even
outside of a barn either.
I'm not even talking about, I'm talking like some people, you just introduce a shot timer and they start falling apart. Some people, you cause a weapon malfunction when they're in training and their whole world crumbles. So we have to get a little bit more serious about training. And we preach about this all the time, and a lot of people, it goes in one ear and out the other. And I pray to God above that the people that it goes in one ear and out the other are never caught in a situation like that, because you're going to regret it. And that's just me being real, guys. We have to get serious about training. And we have to get serious about the fact, I also know, and I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, I know, but I also know a lot of guys that buy hundreds of guns, dozens of guns, hundreds of guns, and they never really train with them. They're always about buying the next gun, and they don't buy ammo, and they don't buy training.
That was the funniest thing I saw walking into a gun store one day. A guy bought a gun and forgot to buy ammo. I turned around and I said, hey, dude, you might want to get some ammo for that.
Yeah. And that's just it. Everybody gets caught up in I need a new gun. No, you need to train with what you have. I'm going to give you a second because I'm going to pull something up. that just happened on Saturday. So
one of the things that I have in my classes that I was teaching before I moved, one of the things that I was always teaching was it's had something to do along the lines of mindset, but more along the lines of controlling your panic. When you panic, it causes a situation inside your body that will not allow you to react to a situation. And that's exactly what that is. It's like the deer in the headlights effect. Your mind hasn't processed that this is happening. And if you freeze in that situation, those critical seconds for you to react are going to mean everything. So you have to learn to control your panic. And just a lot of people are on edge right now. And it's going to be understandable that a lot of people are going to operate in that condition. But you have to not operate in that condition. And as long as you are aware of what's going on in your environment, that's the best way to control that feeling for you. So that's what I have. That's my 2 cents that I have to add with that.
Yep. I completely agree. And this is really, really important for us to understand and know, because it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. If we don't train and we don't understand what we need to, then we're in big trouble. So give me just a second. I am trying to get this.
And I'm also going to make another recommendation. Don't buy 3M double-sided sticky tape. The shit doesn't work.
So this is a proud dad moment, but I also want to show you guys the capabilities of some stuff. My 12-year-old went with me this weekend. Well, there you go. And this is him shooting 1,000 yards. So
you better raise that leg up.
My feet per second and what I actually did at distance. All right, hold dead center.
Center body?
Yep.
Well, we're waiting.
Impact.
Boom.
You see it?
Yep.
Where did it hit? Call it.
Shot him in the dick.
Right on the collarbone. That's a proud dad moment. So sorry, I had to share it with you. But he also did several things. He actually, the instructor, who's a friend of mine, actually took him through the qualifications for an Army sniper, and he hit all of the qualifications for the marksmanship spot of it. He's never shot past like 100. Well, no, I take that back. He had shot 500 yards before, but he just in a very controlled environment. By the end of the class, he was doing wind calls on his own, like with zero help at 12 years old. He can run a pistol really well too, but it's because I started training him and teaching him when he was 8 years old. Really cool though. Like, I mean, I was in my 30s before I actually shot long distance, and he's doing it at 12, but it just goes to show you. And I wanted to give you guys that as an example, kind of a brag on my own son, but I also wanted to give you guys an example of what training can actually do for you. Because if he had never gone to that class, he could have been like that normal FUD at the gun store that, doesn't know what he's doing when it comes to shooting long distance. But now he's learned a life skill, like really, and did it really, really well. So that's what training can get you. And that's why it's so important. You can have hundreds of guns, and if you haven't gotten any training, guess what? You're just a supply dump for the marauders that are going to come to your house and take it in a SHTF situation. But the first thing is mindset, having the mindset to fight for your life and getting the proper training to be able to do that under stress. Fitness is another big one. If we're not strong, if we don't have speed and mobility, we're going to get caught off guard, and we're going to fail. And then there's another thing, and let me pull this up. Unarmed and armed combatives, close quarters, I'm going to pull up a couple of websites, and you're going to know one of them, obviously. But this is a company called ShivWorks, and this is Craig. This is Craig Douglas, who is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to special, like close quarters knife and firearm training. He has course schedules, online courses that you can take. He's widely respected, creates his own self-defense knives, amazing stuff. And then our good friend of the show, Tony Blauer, with the spear system, his total human weapon system. Tony is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to being able to have situational awareness and reaction time. It's important. Find a local Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor or self-defense instructor that's going to give you guys the tools you need for those moments when you can't get to your gun. And it's really important, guys. This is probably one of the most important ones outside of your mindset and situational awareness, is knowing when you identify a threat, can you take care of that threat if they come at you? S2?
Yeah, go to ShivWorks and buy one of their clinch picks. They're great.
They are. Yes, they are. And they have an amazing push dagger too. They have well, I'll show you guys.
I like the clinch pick because the blade is on the top of the blade versus the bottom of the blade.
Yeah. Let me see if he's got it. Does he even have it on his website here? Yeah. So here's what S2 is talking about. The clinch pick. It's a little bitty knife that can go into your belt line, but it's
an impermissible environment knife is what it is.
Yeah. And they have them where, so this is actually, you'll see the blade is actually on top, so you can stick in and pull up, because talk to any police officer, military guy that's ever been in a knife fight, and they'll tell you they'd rather be shot. Like
knives,
99% of the time.
That's what I teach is knives. And yeah, they are the most unpredictable weapon you will ever come across.
Yep. And I was trying to see if it doesn't look like he actually sells his stuff. That's weird. Like the clinch pick was on there, but there's a push dagger that I wanted to show everybody.
Yeah, I think you got to get that right off of ShivWorks.
Okay. Yeah, here's the push dagger. And what's really cool is you can actually buy a package where you get the real one and you get a practice one too. So you can actually roll around with it and do some work. And you know what I'm not doing? I'm not showing this stuff. So let me show that stuff again. I'm sorry about that. So here's the push dagger. There's the practice one, a rubber trainer. And there's one of his double-edged discipline. He's got a ton of knives, and these are all designed around self-defense. There's a Sharpie that looks like a Milwaukee Sharpie, but it's a weapon. So this guy's really thinking about that kind of thing. And then obviously, going back to Tony Blauer, the guy's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to self-defense. So let's recap the 5 things that you guys need to know. And the first one is identifying the patterns of the threat. This is intelligence. This is essentially intelligence. As S2 has said many times on the show here, intelligence is pattern recognition. And if you're recognizing patterns, and if you know the baseline of the area that you're in, like you know your community, you know your neighborhood, and you can identify weird things when they show up. Situational awareness is key for early warnings and understanding what's going on. That's where that pattern recognition comes in. Communication and contingency plans. If you guys don't have an alternate way of communicating with each other, the Signal app is also another simple one to do. It's an encrypted messaging app. Contingency planning, understanding the different plans that you guys need for your families, for your communities. You know, maybe you have a group of guys that you train together and you want to be the together in a crap hits the fan moment, or maybe you're all first responders and you want to be able to respond in the correct way. That's all important to have these alternative communications.
I want to add something in there about the communications thing. If you're going to be if you're going to be using radios, you need to be training with them all the time. One of the things that we've done since we moved, because my office is out in the barn, we use our radios daily now.
Yeah.
And my wife will let me know when she's going somewhere with the radio, and I respond and so forth, but we use our radios every single day.
Yep. So, and that's all important stuff. That's what we call, and Dave talks about this all the time, proving up your equipment. You can buy all the gear in the world. And I used to do this. I would buy all the cool looking gear and I wouldn't go train in it. And then something about a decade ago, I started getting real serious about it. It's actually after I got out of the military, because I was a mechanic in the military, but I got real serious about it when I got married and I started having kids. And that's typically a turning point for most people, especially females. They start having kids, all of a sudden they start getting a lot less anti-gun. I actually saw a clip of a comedian talking about that on actually Bill Maher's show, how she completely changed her ideas on guns when she started having kids. And that's the key, is because you start to identify that nature of a mother starts to seep in, and it makes you start to realize threats when they're out there. But we have to be able to communicate. We have to be able to train up and prove up our equipment. You cannot prove up that you're set up. If you have a full kit and you have a chest rig or a plate carrier and you have all this stuff on it and you're not training with it, you're not going to know whether this thing is going to fall off or if it's going to work if you're running or you're doing any of that kind of stuff.
Or can you even run with it in the first place?
Can you even run with it? Maybe that rig's 30 pounds and you haven't ever ran with 30 pounds. Like, there comes in fitness. You see how all of this stuff, it fits together. It's all building blocks. And then, the next one, the third one was immediate trauma response and medical preparedness. That's everything from a cut, being able to treat a cut on your kid, if you're out at the lake, or to be able to actually save someone's life because their femoral artery is busted and they're bleeding out, and you have seconds to put on a tourniquet. If you don't know what to do, you're going to regret it. And instead of spending your money on DoorDash and a night at the movies, take this stuff seriously, and take your family out and train together.
I'll add something going a step back where we were talking about mindset. If anybody wants to read a book on the subject of potentially having to defend yourself or by taking somebody else's life, read the book On Killing by Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman.
Yep.
He also has a CD set if you can find them. They're very rare. I have one, but read that book.
Yep. So, and then the last one that we talked about was self-defense mindset and readiness, physical readiness. Get trained, get prepared, because you're never going to regret it if you're trained and the moment comes. You will regret it if you're not, and you're not prepared. But this is not this is not paranoia. It's ultimately actually a responsibility for each of us. We actually, this is where we have to be careful about the double talk, because we always want to talk about, leave us alone. Let us be our own people. Okay. You want to be self-sufficient? Guess what you need to learn? You need to learn how to be prepared, because you have to act like nobody's coming to save you. We always talk about, like, we don't want this big government controlling our lives. Well, part of that is actually being able to be prepared to take care of yourself in a time of crisis. If you're not prepared for that, then you are essentially saying, I do want the government to come in. So be prepared. Let's get this together. So one last recap. 1, understand patterns of attack. 2, see the threat coming. 3, communicate and regroup. 4, save lives with medical skills. And 5, fight and move if you must. That's a huge thing. All of this stuff is equally important, guys. As to, I'm going to give you a moment here.
I've just been kind of adding my little 2 cents worth as we go along here for little things that I forgot
Yep.
to mention earlier. And
Yep.
because like I said, I've been really busy the last couple of weeks, and I kind of got caught off guard with this tonight.
You're totally fine, and that was totally on me. I've actually I wish I would have checked Signal earlier because you did message me, and if I would have, I was super busy at work today. I would have gotten this together a lot quicker. I've been kind of flying solo the last 2 weeks, so I was like,
we winged it.
Yeah. So, but no, guys, it's important, and I hope that you guys will take what we're saying seriously. So let's move on to the conflicted question and get you guys' answers before we let you go. Really appreciate it. Had a good crowd tonight. Really appreciate you guys being active in the chat, and really love being able to do this with you guys. So here's a conflicted question. Martial law has been declared by and the police and military are going house to house looking for food, water, and other supplies to confiscate. Communists, your supplies are well hidden and would not be found through normal questioning and searching procedures. However, the official coming to your house is a relative and knows what you have. He informs you that it is his duty to take your supplies or arrest you and your family. How would you address this situation? This is a tough one.
No, it's not.
Okay. Well, let's hear your answer.
I would say one thing to him. Do you want to be first? And then close the door.
Yep. That's definitely drawing a line in the sand. That's getting through all of the BS. So, 07 Black Dog, kill him and eat him.
Yeah, no, that's
not gonna eat him. but yeah, I would generally say that if I know that kind of a situation is going on, first of all, I'm going to have supplies in different locations. They're not all going to be in the same one, but maybe they know all of your locations. So, yeah, I'm probably going to say something similar because my immediate family, my children, surviving is more important than a distant family member. So, sorry, but there are tiers to that. So, yeah, I'm going to have a very similar answer to S2. But yeah, leave your answers to that question in the chat. Real quick, don't forget to sign up for a free Substack account to get that Saturday watch guide, completely free to you guys. And we hope you guys will all do that if you haven't already.
Smash that like button, damn it.
Smash the like button. Couldn't have said it better myself. We really appreciate you guys. And tomorrow, just a reminder, Mike Glover is going to be joining the crew with Chris on the topic of irregular warfare secrets. So same time tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern time for that. It should be a good one. I wish I could join the crew, but got some work that I've got to get done. I've got a lot of content to bring out to you guys from our trips to Florida and some other stuff. So I'll be editing some videos tomorrow night. So look forward to those coming out for you guys. But until then, don't forget, guys, be prepared. Never stop training. Never stop bettering yourself, no matter where you're at, whether you're 12 years old like my son, or you're 85 years old. You can always get better. You can always be better tomorrow than you were today. So don't forget that. And I hope you guys took notes. Keep this stuff. If you guys have questions, hit me up in the Signal chat. On if you're our insiders or our guardians, you guys can hit me up with those, or you can reach out to me at our website, righteoussavages.com. If you send us a chat, I can answer there if you have questions on gear or anything like that. So appreciate it, guys. We'll see you guys soon, and until then, always be prepared, and God bless America.
Hoorah.
I shall never surrender or retreat. And I call on you, in the name of liberty and of patriotism, and everything dear to the American character, to come to our aid with all dispatch. P.S. The Lord is on our side.